You brought in a new refining team for Mark S, which failed to coalesce. You instituted kindness reforms.
Because I'm not Harmony Cobel.
Kindness reforms that seemed to have in no way deterred curiosity or idling by the team once they returned. You arranged an outdoor retreat and team-building occurrence, which resulted in the termination of one employee and the discovery of the true identity of another, at great risk and harm to the Egan name.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Need Some Introduction. I have a new call to action here at the top of the episode for everybody. I just mentioned this for the first time earlier this week in the episode I did on Paradise. If you'd like some video content, our podcast is actually also available on YouTube. I know most of you don't actually listen to the podcast on YouTube, but I did mention that I would give an update on how many subscribers we were getting. And I said, if we get to 100 subscribers on YouTube, we will do a video episode.
Whoa, we meaning who?
Well, that's up for negotiation, Sona.
No, I'm teasing you. You and I discussed this very briefly before. I'm on board.
Cool. And it could be everybody. It could be, maybe it's a special episode. Maybe it's just one of our usual episodes, but with video. I haven't figured all that out yet, but I promise we will have a video content episode, whether it's unique content or just one of our podcasts as a video podcast. But if you're curious to see that, give us a subscription on YouTube. I'll include the link in the show notes. And we've gotten 20 subscribers, Sona. So we are 20% of the way there.
20 more than we had. I like it.
It's only been a few days. So we see how many more people we can get.
Nice.
And of course, if we don't get any subscribers, I assume you don't want video content, so which is fine also. Just putting it out there. Second thing I wanted to mention was Happy Valentine's Day, Sona.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Spending my Valentine's Day with my podcast wife.
That's right.
Apple TV has given us a little bit of a Valentine's Day present, which I already watched. It's this movie, The Gorge, which is a very expensive horror action romance. And I watched it and I didn't like it. But your mileage may vary if you're looking for something action and romance. The first half of this movie, where most of the romance occurs, is actually pretty strong. I was totally on board with the first hour of this movie. And then when the action, sci-fi, horror stuff kicked in, it was well done. I thought it was very, this is Scott Derrickson, he did the first Doctor Strange movie. He did The Black Phone. Sona, did you ever see The Black Phone?
I've never even heard of that.
Oh, I thought you would have liked it. It's from Stephen King's son. It very much feels like a Stephen King film. It stars Ethan Hawke as the villain, this killer. And it was a big hit a couple of years ago. So I thought you might have seen it.
I have not seen that. There was an interesting preview before Severance for a show that, of course, I can't recall the name right now. I'm not sure if it was a show or a movie, but it seemed like, a suspense type of thing, a woman that can't remember stuff. I feel like this genre is very popular lately, of people who can't remember who they are or how they got where they are. But, that
Surface.
Jennifer
Isn't
Garner thing. Yes, it was called Surface. Thank you for saving me from myself.
This is season 2 of Surface. By the way,
no.
you may not have remembered, because it's strange that this got a second season. We had discussed very briefly, this is years ago when this happened, maybe covering that show on this podcast. So
wow, I didn't retain that at all. Okay.
And it is back for a second season. I think it's based on the book. It has something to do with a woman is investigating the murder of her mom from years ago. She falls off a boat and she loses her memory, and then she doesn't trust anyone around her. So it's rich people. I think it's right around the time we were doing White Lotus. So more rich people, more rich people problems, basically. Yeah, it's season 2 of this show. I hadn't heard great things about season 1, but I guess it was popular enough to get a second season.
The preview looked good, but then it must say something that I never sought out the first season of it.
It could also be there's just so many things that come out. It's hard to keep track of all of them.
The way you're describing it, by the way, I will get my 30-year-old movie reference out of the way just at the top of this show. Sounds like Overboard, but a dramatic version.
Very similar. Yes, good point.
Right? The Goldie Hawn movie, which I personally detest. But anyway.
They remade that movie recently, by the way.
I know. I didn't see the remake because I hate the first one so much.
Yeah, so that's the only Valentine's Day recommendation I had. There's actually a lot of genre films that are Valentine's Day adjacent. I have wanted to do a slasher film and rom-com and blend them together. I thought it would be like a fun idea, and I've always wanted to write a script like that. And this movie, which is called Heart Eyes, where the Heart Eyes killer is killing people on Valentine's Day, and it's a slasher, and it's a comedy, and it's also a rom-com with a full romantic comedy inside of it. My letterbox review for it, I gave it 3 stars, and I said, it's pretty good slasher. It's a pretty good rom-com. It gets most of the way towards where I wanted it to go. So if you do want to see a slasher rom-com, they've made one, and it's pretty good. Pretty good. Nothing too enthusiastic in these recommendations this week. Oh, and then going back to The Gorge, I think it's well made. By the time it gets to the end, it is so rote, and the movie is retelling us what I guess they're afraid we've forgotten the point of the film to some extent. It's just not interesting, all the machinations it goes through by the end. But I did like the first half of the movie. The romantic couple is Anya Taylor-Joy and Miles Teller, and directed by Scott Derrickson, someone who has a lot of talent. All the action is well executed and it's well done. I just didn't find the script that interesting after the first half. It starts off with a pretty cool idea. There are 2 snipers. They are on basically a suicide mission. They're supposed to be keeping an eye on this gorge where supposedly is like the mouth to hell or something. I wish it was the mouth to hell. That would actually be a pretty interesting concept. It turns out to be some weird conspiracy instead. The opening, when we basically know as little as possible, is actually a really solid film. And then as they try to explain everything, I'm like, okay, I'm less and less interested as this goes on. The first half and the romance is fun. So I understand why they put it out on Valentine's Day. Unfortunately, it doesn't make it all the way to the end. But reviews have been pretty good. Word of mouth has been pretty good. So maybe you'll enjoy this more than I did. Just putting it out there. It is on Apple TV. If you're watching Severance, you can watch this too. It's not terrible. Another very mediocre. Meh, it's okay. That's my recommendation for the week.
There are worse ways to spend your
Exactly.
time.
There's worse things you can watch. If you can't think of anything else, watch this. So this episode 5, we're only halfway through the season now. Trojan's Horse, directed by Sam Donovan, not directed by Ben Stiller, who's directed most of these episodes, but not all of them. Takes a little breather in between with his less action-packed episodes.
Yeah, this did feel like a breather. I agree.
In a good way, by the way. Before we get into the episode breakdown, I want to get your general opinion, but I like that this is like taking a breather. This is what I kind of said I needed after last week. We need to kind of digest a lot of the stuff that's happened like so quickly. And I like that the episode gave us that breathing room.
I agree.
Okay, a few follow-up things. I had mentioned in the very last episode that there is a LinkedIn profile for Ms. Wang, and on the Lumon website that they have a LinkedIn page, which is very funny. I forgot to mention when I brought that up, that she is a management intern who is unsevered in her description. And I just want to bring that up because in the universe of Lumon, you can imagine if people are so upset about severing people that severing children would probably be a little problematic. So she is an unsevered person. And by the way, I think that's explicit in this episode. We'll actually get around to it. But considering what she says, she's been very well brainwashed by her training program. And the thing she says about severed people is pretty messed up.
Yes. I still remember her line from the first episode, but why are you a child? Because of when I was born.
Because of when I was born.
Classic Miss Wong.
Speaking on Miss Wong, the outfits these people are wearing, you sent an article or a screenshot of an article where you can like imitate their style, which is pretty great.
Yeah, and the options they gave for Milchick's outdoor gear were quite expensive. I don't know if you looked at the price tags on those, but yeah, they weren't exact replicas. So I'm not sure if his outfit really cost that much, but wow. Serious
sticker shock compared to people were sending me screenshots of jackets when I was saying I wanted to buy from the agency to buy Michael Fassbender's jackets. And they're like $125, $75. I'm like, I can afford that. I thought it was going to be a $3,000 jacket.
Yeah.
but in this regard, these are $3,000 jackets and $1,000 pants.
$1,400 gloves, I
Yeah,
think. Yeah,
it's crazy, crazy. It's a beautiful outfit, though.
it really is.
Oh, the other thing I want to touch on is you brought this up, I think, 2 episodes ago, and I have been researching this, and it seems to be a legitimate, not only theory. I think this is something that is being encoded in the show, and we see it again in this very episode. And it was what you were mentioning, the tones in the elevator, and how you had read an article about that.
To be clear, I didn't read the article because I try not to read stuff because then I will get influenced by it so easily. I'm very impressionable. I did see as I was scrolling through Reddit, sometimes the titles of the posts are very descriptive. And the title said, it's not Heli R because there was no ding in the
Right.
elevator, no second ding in the elevator. I'm not
Right.
sure what it was.
It was a second ding. It's a second ding. Yeah.
Mhm.
Like I kind of dismissed this at the time, saying that, well, maybe that's just a game that the show is playing. But I want to now bring it up because it's something that occurs in this very episode. And this YouTube video that I found was really fascinating. This person's a musician and is talking about how the theme song to the show uses basically just these 3 progressions over and over again in different combinations. And all the music in the show also use these different themes. So all the different pieces of music, as you could probably notice, use the same tones over and over again. And what's interesting is that those same tones are the tones that are used in the ding on the elevator. So basically when they descend and you hear the second ding, I don't know music theory, but there's natural chords and there are these dissonant chords. And basically when they descend into their innie self, you hear the innie chords. You hear the dissonant chords. When they ascend, you hear a natural chord. But the other thing they mentioned, which is really fascinating, is all the soundtrack music when they are on the severed floor uses those dissonant chords. So when you're talking to someone who's an innie, you hear dissonant chords on the soundtrack.
Oh.
This person, based on their analysis and what they're describing, the show plays by those rules always. So there are some things in it, which I won't spoil here, that in his theory, if it's true, we are sometimes seeing people who are innies, for example, who have not revealed themselves to be innies yet. Right? So I don't want to go into spoiler territory if that turns out to be the truth, but just to bring up the fact that that appears to be the case, first of all. And, if people want to do their own research, go ahead and pursue it.
Very interesting.
But I do want to bring it up because in the very first scene of this episode, we hear someone go into an elevator who's on the severed floor. They go into exports. And when they go down, we hear the second ding, the dissonant chord, which made me think, what does that mean? If they're already on the severed floor and we hear that sound again, then they're not their severed selves there, or they're an alternate severed self there. So how many different selves are potentially in a person using this technique?
That makes my head hurt.
It does make my head hurt too, but it is, I think, something else that they might be playing with. And I think that it is something that they are cluing us into in that moment, right? Like if it's almost as if they assume we know about the tone thing, so that when he gets into the elevator and it descends, and by the way, it's like, it's as if it's like a suspense beat. He gets in the elevator, we hear the first ding, he descends, the music swells, it goes dead silent, and then we hear the second ding. It's as if they're telling us, what is this second ding, right? So it's very, very clever in the games it's playing with us. And the last thing I wanted to bring up as just follow-up from last week, in editing the episode, I wanted to circle back to the question you asked me in that episode as to how interested I am in the Kier mythology. What I was trying to get to there, and I thought of a better way to express myself, and it's not just you, by the way, it's because after this episode came out, I read some actual, professional critics that were much more accusatory of the show than you were, by the way, in saying like, oh, this is just weirdness and that they're just throwing things out there and none of it makes any sense. And I can understand being turned off by this particular aspect of the show, but I did want to defend the show in the fact that it is the exact opposite of just throwing weird stuff out there, because it's a continuation of the metaphor they're building on already. What I was trying to get to in answering your question was that I'm interested in it as metaphor. The more literal it becomes, the less interested I am in it.
I understood that's what you were saying.
Yeah, I think you understood that. I was just trying to expound on that a little bit here.
And
in my-
I don't think that it's just weirdness for the sake of weirdness.
Yeah.
It's just that for me specifically and my taste, it doesn't pique my interest.
Right. No, I
But I
understand.
don't think it's the same with the goats. I don't think the goats are just weird for the sake of weird, but I don't care for the goats.
The goats might be weird for the sake of weird. I mean, or so far.
No,
anyway.
we've learned too much about the goats now to
They're going
to leave
there's
them
going to be
behind.
more. There's definitely going to be more. Obviously, there's an analogy here if you think about like Scientology and other religions too, and other self-help techniques as well. But Scientology is just one of these.
I think the Scientology references were very clear in this episode.
Yes, especially when she has to go. They're asking whether she wants to go for another one of these cleansings,
Mhm.
which is true, right? In Scientology, you have these,
Mhm.
I forget what they call it, but they're like processing, I think it's called.
I think
And it's-
auditing.
Auditing,
Is it
yes,
auditing? Yeah.
exactly, yes. And and then you have to hold these instruments, and they almost like they have to balance out these different temperaments. And I think that that's the interesting part in looking at the Kier story, to once again not even think about whether there was an actual twin or not, but this idea that maybe he is internally fighting with his own tempers, right? And there was this laziness, this ease of life that he was tempted by, but then he needed to, in a way, defeat that part of himself rather than thinking about it as literally another person. Maybe it is another person, but literally just something, an aspect of himself he needed to defeat. That's what he is overcoming in that moment. But then the show is not only just putting that out there, we literally see in the text of the episode that now Helena, she laughs at the story. She has a sexual transgression. She gets drowned and kills off, at least in the moment, this other aspect of herself. It literally is mirroring exactly the story that we saw.
Mhm.
So just to the point that the show is really smart about, what it's doing. It could be totally up its own ass at some point. And I can understand people getting frustrated with that. But I think that it is incredibly careful in its design, and all these things are working as literal jokes and as metaphors and as text and as subtext all at the same time, which I find extremely impressive, especially when I see so much lazy writing in so much of the shows we watch. It seems like these scripts are so thoroughly designed. And maybe I use that as a segue into this particular episode. I really like the fact that this episode, the one we're about to talk about, is so thematically about this alienation. Every character in all these different ways, some people are in positions of power. Some people don't trust other people. Some people are the people who betrayed someone. Some people, have been fired, like Irv, for example, but they are all in their own way, have all become isolated from each other. And I think that's really fascinating. It's almost like you can't control the outcomes of these actions, and everybody has ended up completely separated from each other by the end of this episode. So let's jump into this particular episode. And before we do any of the breakdown, what did you think of it? How did you like this?
I liked this. I like that we weren't so deep into the mythology here. I think excuse me, sorry. I'm like recovering from something that's making me cough a lot. What I wanted to see most after last week's episode were the interactions between Mark and Helly.
Yeah.
And so this really paid off in that way. We got to see a lot of that. I did find it kind of surprising the fact that Helena, who is an Egan, wasn't really discussed all that much among the innies. I mean, to me, that would be so scandalous, but maybe they had time to process it in between the last episode and this episode. And so it wasn't that big a deal. I just feel like that's something I wouldn't be able to stop talking about.
I think that's one of the interesting dynamics here is that we get those things, but we don't get them in the satisfying way I
like
expected.
A direct conversation about it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And then once again, that specific thing is the subtext of the entire episode.
Yes.
In the fact that Dylan and Mark are not friends right now because Dylan has his own agenda. And he also thinks that Mark trying to put his blinders back on is an insult to him when he's just lost Irv.
Yes.
And then, of course, he intentionally like throws out there, oh, have you talked to her about this? Knowing full well that he probably has not. And then, of course, you'd see like, well, Mark, like you said, why isn't Mark talking to her about this? He's thinking to himself, I have been completely fooled. I thought I was working behind Lumon's back while I was telling the head Egan our whole entire plan. They know we know about Miss Casey. They know everything. I was assuming after last week that he would be so utterly paranoid. He's not paranoid. He's utterly defeated. He's like, what's the point of any of this? I have no control over anything. And even my like the adventure he was on, this mystery solving excursion he was on, and this like supposed affair he was going to have with Helly, this like newfound love for the first time in the case of his innie, all of that is blown up, right? Because they know exactly what he's doing and they're letting him do it. So it's like, well, if they're letting me do it, am I even on the right track or not? And then, of course, his romance with Helly, it's just like, well, that was a disaster, right? I thought the scene between them is great when he's like, apparently I did not know it was you. And she is shocked and disturbed by that fact. And he's just like equally so, right? She's disgusted by the fact that this enemy of hers has co-opted her body. And he's just like, I don't know who you are. I don't even know if you're lying to me right now because I was completely fooled before. So I don't trust myself anymore.
Which is fair. Even her own processing of it surprised me because it seemed very clean to her of like, I don't know that person. I don't know what she did. But I feel like as the inside version, you would be like, holy cow, are you serious? I am the head of this whole operation, essentially. Right? I mean, she seemed to just very cleanly be like, what that lady did has nothing to do with me.
She did want to have that conversation, because think about it. She has not been in the severed floor since the end of last season, right? I mean, she woke up for the first time when she was in the drowning, and now this is the first time that she's in the severed floor. She says to Mark, do you want to know what I saw up there? He's like, no, thank you.
Right.
Which he really should ask her a lot of questions there because there's a lot of important information. But if he can't trust her, then he doesn't even care. So in a way, it's frustrating to watch intentionally so because you'd realize that they're working against each other. And we now know, we heard the second ding. We had the POV shot for the first time of going into Helly R's POV, right? So we know that this is truly her innie, but they don't know that. And she's, once again, everybody's in isolation. Dylan doesn't want to mess up this new thing he has where he can meet with his outside wife, and it gets threatened multiple times. Mark is, obviously mistrustful of everybody and just feels ultra paranoid at this point. Helly, of course, feels completely isolated. She just has this unbelievable trauma on herself that maybe the worst possible outie is her outie. And that outie like now has come in and infiltrated her life, this thing that she was just starting to build in there. And she has no one she could talk to about it. No one will even listen to her because she's completely mistrusted. And I think it's no small part to the fact that Irv not being there has immediately broken the dynamic of the team completely, which I think is an interesting aspect. But that whole isolation thing I was mentioning goes beyond that, right? Like Milchick is isolated right now.
Okay, first of all, I don't want to jump the gun, but the Milchick performance review stuff was amazing.
Incredible. Yes, incredible.
So I just want to say like that added some comic relief, at least for me.
Oh, definitely. I mean, the whole, like, here's the lunch menu.
The folder, the printouts, the paper
Oh my God,
clips.
having to review it. It was like so pretty, perfectly.
And this is happening monthly.
Yes, every month. Oh, very important, by the way. This is the first month. So all that, it's been 5 months, it's been this, whatever. No, it's been 1 month. This is his first month review. All right, let's start breaking this down a little bit because we have so many stops to make along the way. I do want to call out, by the way, that this dentist who's rolling down the road, or maybe he's not a dentist. Maybe he is. He's in scrubs, right? So it's probably a dentist heading to O&D to get the dental instruments. He's whistling the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald,
Yes.
which is yet another song about drowning, a ship sinking and drowning in a lake. So a lot of water imagery, lots of names here in the show that transcribe to water symbols, all this talking about drowning. So drowning is a big theme here. I don't know if it's like your drowned persona or if Casey drowned, or I don't know, but there's definitely some water symbolism here in the show heavily. Felicia's there giving these dental tools. What did you think about this? So they're heading down into the exports area, was what Felicia called it before, with these implements. This is where Casey is, and presumably other people as well. Do you think they're unconscious there and someone's maintaining their teeth? Is that what you're thinking is happening here?
Gosh, I'm just thinking about this while we're talking. Sometimes they identify dead people through their dental records. Maybe they're screwing around with people's.
So they can't identify
I don't
them?
know. Well, because the whole thing, right, is that Mark says he identified Gemma's body. Grasping at straws here.
You could probably maintain your own dental hygiene if you were conscious. So that's where my head went immediately, that they're somehow unconscious down there and they have to maintain their teeth for them. What about muscle tone? Got to do something for muscle tone too. So who knows?
I mean, if they're cryogenically, I don't know. I don't want to get into this.
By the way, and this is a much bigger thing, a mystery that is continuously teased here, and we still don't know the details to it. Maybe next week, I think we will find more, is just the whole idea of like Audi Bert. Who is he talking to? I no longer think he's talking to Ragabi.
Irv, you mean?
Irv. I meant Irv, yes, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So who is he talking to? Yeah, what's the agenda of those conversations? And of course, the fact that he obviously knows about all this Lumon stuff, knows about the exports floor. His Audi knew about those things before he started working there. So he is some kind of agent of some kind, whether he was recruited or whether he went in as an agent. And of course, we don't know anything about what his agenda is yet beyond that. But we'll get around to it too, because he has a date with Bert and his husband, Fields. Fields. We do immediately get some clarity on some of the questions we had last week as like, oh, Mark is unified now. How is this going to work? Like, hasn't he done his research? Like, if he knows that Helly is Helena or just looked her up and found her LinkedIn profile, what's the level of knowledge of this version of himself who's in that Ortbo experience? And we find out here that actually he's not fully unified. Ragabi she's tapping the brakes. She thinks Petey went too fast. So they've taken a while before they try to do another of these exercises to synchronize his innie and outie. He's drinking some goop, which I guess facilitates this process. I don't know what that is. It's really gross looking. She's living in his basement. That's what Petey was doing too. So there's a lot of mirroring here of Petey living in his basement. Now she's living in his basement. Yeah, and other than him having that flash of Gemma when he was making love to Helly, he hasn't had any of this crossover, but it's starting to happen at the end of this episode.
I feel like he should mention to Ragabi that that's happening, and maybe he does, but we just don't see it happen in this episode.
It's happening right in that moment at the end, which is a great scene. Just when he suddenly starts hearing Casey talking, it's really, really cool. And then he's going up the hallway, and people had mentioned how his hallway, the light fixture, creates this effect like a long hallway. And that's exactly where he is when he suddenly starts envisioning himself walking down that hallway. So it's very cool that there's this little corridor in his house that is like a trigger for that other memory. Oh, and of course, one more thing I wanted to bring up is that when Ragabi shows up, he's on the phone with Devin, and Devin's like, how's the burning the images into your eye shit go? How's that going? Which indicates to me that he has not shared this with her, right? So there's a few things we were asking, like, does she know what he's doing? Is he integrated? It's like, no, he's not fully integrated yet, and Devin is not in on this. Just so that 1 minute of episode kind of fills in those blanks.
Right.
So then we have this interesting scene where we have Helena, Drummond, and Natalie. I mean, this company has 5 employees. It seems like they're these paid people. Drummond is like listening in on conversations at pips, and now he's here like calling the shots and he's doing the performance review. This guy has a lot of hats to wear.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised at his role in this episode.
At first, I just thought he was like some kind of muscle, but now he's everywhere.
Same.
So Helena wants to know, should she be the one that breaks the news to the dad? This is interesting that Drummond tells her that it's better if the dad doesn't know about this contretemps. An unfortunate events indeed. That's basically that translation there. But interesting that they haven't told the dad about this. So Milchick came up with this plan, did most of the planning for this. Do you think that everybody knew Helena was planning to go in as Heli-R? The reason I mentioned that is because in the previously on, they say that Mark needs Heli-R to finish the file, and we're going to give everybody to him, including Heli-R. Saying that they're going to give Heli-R to him indicates the innie. So do you think Helena went rogue with Milchick assisting, or do you think that the plan always was for her to be undercover?
On the one hand, I thought the plan was always for her to be undercover. But on the other hand, I didn't understand how they could not fill in the father on what happened, because now she's going back in
Right.
severed. And so what's the explanation for why we've changed to having an undercover Helena to a true severed Heli-R? Nobody's going to ask any questions about that besides people that actually know what happened. Helena can't now know what Heli-R knows. So,
right.
You know?
Or do they think, I mean, I assume, they say that he's processed 81% of the file.
Yeah.
He gets to 85 by the end of this episode. And so that's like a ticking clock that they've introduced into the show as well. Theoretically, you'd assume that he's not that important after that. And definitely not the others are not that important after the file is completed. To your point before, it's interesting because, what does everybody think is going on? Why is she not going in again? And not only that, but Drummond, when she says, is my dad on board with this? That like it's basically his idea to send Heli-R back in. So the dad is apparently on board with this plan, but is not aware of how badly things went in this most recent event. So it's just a little weird that that's the case. Maybe they are aware to some extent that she wants to go in for her own agenda, because they probably think, I would assume, that like we know what they're doing anyway. It's not like they don't have cameras in the hallways when he's wandering around to visit other groups and stuff like that, right? So I don't think that they think she adds that much as far as knowing all of the secrets of what's going on down there. I would assume, because it seems like they're very cavalier about just being like, hey, who cares? We'll send you in there. It'll be okay. And they're like, really? Is that, She also seems kind of disposable, which is interesting because she supposedly is going to be the next CEO. But it seems like it's one of those puppet CEO situations where the dad's always really in control, because they don't really seem that concerned with bad outcomes for her.
Yeah, I suppose that's true. And that seems to be causing her a lot of stress as to like, why are you putting me back in this situation where my
two people well-being
is at risk? Yeah.
She calls them animals. Oh, ouch. I do want to call something out here, though. I have had this theory for multiple episodes now that Milchick is all innie, that he's like basically an innie that was given the permission to be an outie, somehow earned it. Not sure how that all worked, but I've always had that feeling because he always seemed more like an innie than an outie. And the reason I mentioned that is because we have a few things. One is when she says they're animals, and they cut to him and he seems offended by this. Later, when Miss Wong says, don't let them think that they're people, he again seems to bristle about this. So there's multiple times when people are disparaging innies where he seems to be offended by things. Once again, I think that my theory, despite the fact that all my other theories so far have been wrong, that I feel like this theory may actually be correct.
I think it could be correct, or he could be developing compassion for them, right? And understanding that there are humans involved here.
Yeah. if he sees their personhood. I mean, he did try to have this kinder, gentler management style.
Right.
As you mentioned earlier, or we discussed a little bit earlier, they mentioned to her, oh, are your tempers in balance again? Maybe you'll have another obligement session tonight. So very Scientology coded there. And Drummond mentions the fact that him completing Cold Harbor the work is mysterious and important. So it's priority number one, even above her concerns, which of course she's one of the highest of all VIPs here at this company. And even then they're like, no, not important enough. You need to go back. But what did you think about their critique, not only here, but later on during the evaluation? Do you think Milchick was behind all of this? Like that would be a lot of power they're giving him, no?
What do you mean by behind all of this?
Do you think that was Milchick going off book? Like they're blaming him for this. So do you think that he is to blame because he managed it badly? Or do you think it was his idea basically to have the event and everything that happened there and how badly it went was all on him?
I think they're using him as a scapegoat for that, but I don't think it's truly like that.
I do think he was more involved, though. I think that this was like the critique they give him where he says, I'm not like Cobel, so that's why you're punishing me. And they were like, well, it wasn't just that. There's a lot of bad things that happened on that trip.
Did they really? There was one really bad thing. But other than that, I mean, I think maybe he was supposed to have known that Irv was getting suspicious and should have kept them separated or preempted that somehow. Do you think they know about, well, they do know about the sex, but that gets confirmed too. So,
or at least Milchick knows about it. I mean, so if he knows, everybody knows, I guess.
Right. So I guess those are two things that shouldn't have happened.
So then we get into this whole sequence now that she's forced to go back in. This is a pretty incredible part of the show here. She goes in, we hear the second ding. This is her now, Helly downstairs for the first time. And Milchick is like, MDR together again, which is great. Like this casual, like, hey, everybody. When it's like
reunited.
Yeah. First of all, as if the fact that, hey, all reunited, ignoring the fact that you've been pretending that Helly's been here the whole time, and that Irv is gone. Like it's like it's so foundationally screwed up. It's hilarious. And then Helly, of course, has so many questions. She was down here as me. and
yes,
she's just
as
like,
you would expect. Yes.
All of this is just one shock after another. But then, of course, this is like the isolation thing I was mentioning. Mark and Dylan are like, maybe she still is. Like, this is really rough. Like, think about it. Like, Mark was like in love with this woman. Mm-hmm. And now he's just like, I don't know who you are. Don't get away from me. A severe reversal. I mean, and you have to think about it from her point of view. Their kiss was minutes ago in her point of view.
And from his point of view, he had sex with a stranger.
Yeah, exactly. And not worse than a stranger.
And worse than a stranger. Worse than a stranger, yes.
Like Darth Vader.
Yeah.
And of course, they ask, where's Irving? He's not coming back unless in watermelon form.
That was a good carving.
The watermelon looked delicious.
Very recognizable to be Irv.
Yes, absolutely. It's like a 3D printed.
Yeah, someone very talented. Yeah.
And then Milchick diverts this with his, do you know the story of, I can't even pronounce the word, but it's like the story of Charles the 11th.
You know what? I had watched with the captioning and the spelling made even less sense.
Exactly.
It was pronounced, but yes.
That umlaut over the A, or it's not an umlaut, it's only one. So I don't even know how to pronounce that, but it's very funny. I did like the fact, like when Milchick is like, do you guys know that story? And with the Swedish pronunciation, right. And there's just dead silence. And they're like, assume we don't.
Why don't you tell us?
I mean, which is funny to ask an innie, do you know that story? It's like, where would they have heard that story? So he's the gray coat, which is what the translation of that is. And yeah, this is a famous story. It's probably apocryphal. The idea that the king would go among the common people and talk to them and hang out at the bars, and he'd find out what's really going on. And if the knights were charging them too much money or bullying them or stealing from them or who the criminals were, he'd learn it from the people on the streets. And that's all Helena was doing. She was here to hear your grievances and be a better leader.
Completely unbelievable.
Right. And my favorite is how they're so angry at the end. They're like, you killed Irv, and they're like, he's not coming back and all that. Milchick at the end of the meeting is like, this went well. Which made me laugh out loud because I've been in so many meetings where like everybody's at each other's throats at the end. Like you have like 3 different teams that are completely on different pages. And at the end of the meeting, like, because it's just like the random time has ended, the organizer of the meeting is just like, well, that was productive. I'm like,
I was
it?
about
Was
to
it
say the
productive?
exact same phrase. That was productive.
I'm like, I don't know if that was productive, just in my opinion. This went well. I love that. And yeah, the dynamic here is terrible. Like it's part of it is Irving's missing. I think this is very clever, by the way. That happens all the time when you have like a friend dynamic or you have a coworker dynamic. When the dynamic changes and everything doesn't work the way it did before. And I think it's really interesting that they are playing this out here, which is something that we've all dealt with, but this is a very specific version of it. So A, it's the dynamic, the interpersonal dynamic has changed, but then B, it's the fact that his disappearance from the team is such a contentious thing, right? Dylan is infuriated that basically he's been murdered, and he hates the fact that Mark is now trying to play his previous version of himself. Now, is he really just putting blinders on, or is he just completely defeated by everything that's happened? And then, of course, nobody trusts Helly. So you have this like really toxic relationship between the 3 of them right now.
During this period, also, I was wondering if this was somehow evidence of the outside version merging with the inside version of Mark. And so the standoffishness was him being like, I don't know you people. I'm not interested in any of this. That's not why I'm here. I'm not sure about that.
Well, jumping ahead a little bit, during the funeral,
Yes.
Mark says, Irv isn't dead, just not here. And later on, when he's talking to Ragabi, right before he starts having the what do you want to call it, that fugue state he goes into, he says to her, Gemma isn't dead, just not here, which is literally what he says about Irv earlier in the episode. So I think that's just showing us that there is starting to be this bleed over between the 2 versions of himself.
I like the little exchange too about the ashes in the box. Who's in there then?
Exactly. And yeah, I mean, who knows, right?
But yes, the rearranging of the cubicles also was very stark, right? The into that kind of 3-space pinwheel type thing.
The tri-station. Now it's a tri-station instead of a cubicle. They did that immediately. And even worse is the photograph that has like, it's not even like
gosh.
They didn't even recrop it. It's just like he's missing in the photo now.
Yikes.
Just like an emptiness in the frame.
It's that tool that you can use on your photos to just eliminate someone.
Right. That Google AI thing.
Yes.
And Dylan is really outraged by all of this. And Milchick, right in front of everybody, says, be careful, Dylan. Words have consequences. You wouldn't want to have some of your privileges rescinded. And of course, we know exactly what he's talking about. But everybody kind of looks like, what are they talking about?
Yeah.
But so once again, all this mistrust between all of them. He does ask to have a funeral. Mark says it's okay as long as it's quick. That's a really messed up.
Yeah.
What did you think about Milchick and Miss Huang preparing for the bereavement kit? The bereavement kits are usually only for people who die on the floor.
Right. So what has happened in the past, first of all?
Right.
I feel like it might be goat related.
It could be someone gets butt by a goat and falls down the hill.
Yeah.
Could just be an old person gets a heart attack or something falls on top of their heads.
Could be. Yeah. Some paintings that somebody hid way up high.
There's probably a warehouse or something going on, something type of work somewhere that someone got knocked in the head.
First of all, it's like there are people that they've just discovered Shutterfly or something, and now they're putting somebody's face on everything, right? Because
yes,
the marshmallows,
the mugs,
yeah, like now the mugs, yeah. And
O&D has been very busy, very busy.
I loved the exchange between him and Miss Wong because he said exactly what I was thinking when she shared her opinion. That's not a question. That's an opinion.
That's right. And then, oh man, it's so cutting. She goes, "Is it your first review today?" That was a question. This girl is ruthless. I mean, she's been trained very well. She's the right type of person for this company.
But you know what? It is a child that would have that black and white attitude, right? It's only when you get older that you see all the shades of gray and think, well, that's not a compassionate approach to people.
Well, she also doesn't like that he uses big words.
That's right.
So Mark's spirit is broken here. He's playing it off as a tough guy. He starts coughing and then goes into the bathroom. And at first I thought it was him just play acting to get away out of the situation. But he seems to have this cough now. And we saw Petey started having this as well. So this is not a good sign for his future prognosis.
I mean, it's probably that thing he's drinking in the morning. That doesn't look good for you.
Yeah, it could be. But then that scene in the bathroom between him and Helly, another really interesting scene where he just doesn't even know what to say to her. Like, I can't trust what I'm saying to you. I can't trust what I'm feeling. I can't trust, what happened between me and this other person. I thought it was you. I thought, I'm sure when he was intimate with her, he thought he was talking to Helly. So he can't trust. Yeah. And this is, once again, you have to think that this isn't like a week later. This is, hours after they had sex, so it's like, he can't process any of this. That's the other thing that made me think about this show, by the way, given the fact that the Severed, the way they are as Severed, that they're always in work mode, basically. Like this is just, they don't even have sleep periods unless they fall asleep on the job or are able to take a nap in the rest room or something. They don't even get to sleep on a regular basis. So like, when are they processing all this craziness that's happening?
Good point.
Like you don't have any downtime. You literally have to see the person 5 minutes later. You're like face to face with all these people all the time. It's truly exhausting.
Especially if you're an introvert.
Yeah, true. Yeah. And Miss Wong, of course, says that thing about don't let them feel too human. And it's interesting here too. The corporate dynamic of this, I think, is very fun, in the fact that Milchick was always second guessing Cobel last season. And I like the fact that immediately that, he has this intern now basically doing his role. And she has literally taken on his role, second guessing everything he does, just like when Cobel had that power as well. And just like everything else on this show, he's finding out that, he probably wanted to make decisions in Cobel's stead last season. And he probably is feeling some sympathy now, being like, oh, I thought she was just messing up or not following the rules or whatever. And there's no way to win. I think he's finding out with these people.
Welcome to being a manager.
Exactly. And then they have the funeral. There's a little animation. Another thing that they made very much on the quick, with a little the funeral dirge playing on it as well. The Windows 95 version of it. We hear a eulogy from Dylan for the least fun guy in the world. He was pretty fun. He put the dick in contradiction. He put some toner in his coffee one time, and he accidentally drank it. Miss Wong does not get to play the theremin again, by the way.
She got a few notes out, but yeah.
She just started. Milchick says, you can play for me later. I know you practiced. I think the theremin is best in moderation.
I think that's true. I agree.
She was very good, by the way, last time. They definitely rehearsed it. That was pretty well done. Very funny, though, that she's like, ooh, I get to play the theremin again. Nope, you do not. Another interesting thing here is that everybody has now reset to their personalities, whether they're sincere or not, or maybe these are all just play acting now, but they've reverted to their personalities from season one. At the beginning of season one, Mark is always like smiling and going along and being the manager. And like, I'm trying to be like Petey. And like, if you follow the rules, you can make this a fun job. And that is all an act on his part, but he's going back into like Mark manager mode. And then Dylan is poking at people, always subverting people. But it's like, it now is not just him performing that, of being like, I'm better than everybody, and that's why I don't have to pay attention to everybody. Now he's legitimately furious over the Irv thing, but he has reverted back into that personality. And the same thing, Helly is like on the outside looking in, going like, what the hell's going on? And she, again, is just alone looking at everybody going like, what's going on right now? And no one even wants to talk to her this time. In the other situations, like she was at least welcomed into the team. Now she's just like on the outside looking in. I feel especially bad for her. Like it's not culpable for any of this. She is like completely alienated from everybody now. She has nobody. She can't talk to any of these people. She knows that her outside self is nightmarish. She's going to want to like commit suicide again or something.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, she did it before. She could do it again.
I'm very curious to see what she'll try to do to make any of this tenable for her. Oh, Dylan's in the room by himself, and a couple of things I wanted to bring up. First of all, of course, the melon head, which looks incredible, like you mentioned, and the melon looks delicious and seems to have no seeds in it at all.
They've basically bred the seeds out of watermelons
I
at this
know,
point.
I know.
It's pretty
But
crazy.
you still usually get those little ones.
Yeah.
This looks
No,
like
I
a
agree.
completely
Yeah.
virgin piece of watermelon. But most important of all, he sees the poster just hang in here. And this is a hilarious detail. Speaking of O&D being in overdrive here, the just hang in here poster from season 1 was the traditional cat hanging on the little rope. And Irv says that always gives him inspiration, the cat just trying to hang in there. But the just hang in there has been replaced with Dylan in his Jesus Christ pose, holding the Audis open with the two levers.
You know what? I didn't recognize that image, and I thought I was losing my mind because I remembered it being the standard kitten poster. So I'm so happy you explained that to me. Thank you.
Yeah, it's Dylan in that pose, which is hilarious. Double duty
That
there.
is hysterical.
That they've redesigned the poster, as part of this supposed reformation of the company. New way of treating the innies. Made this icon out of Dylan, but also a reminder of Dylan's heroism at his lowest point. And of course, the whole weird thing, I brought it up in last week. What a weird last thing for Irv to say to Dylan, but no, it was an Easter egg because he has left him the map and the instructions of how to get to the elevator. I actually paused it to read, and it's like very simple instructions.
I was going to pause it, and then it moved away so fast. I thought, I guess I wasn't supposed to read it.
I thought the same thing, like, oh, it's like a long instructions, but then I just paused it. It literally says, like, from O&D, that's the first words, go, down this hallway, make a left, then go here. It's literally like a turn by turn instructions to the elevator. So now he knows how to get there. And I'm pretty sure Dylan is going to follow up on this, even with the rewards and stuff, because the one thing he says over and over again in this episode is that he warned me, he asked for my help with something, and I should have done more. I didn't pay attention. So I think now this is his chance to make up for it. But he does leave the instructions behind, which is interesting. So maybe he does still need to think it over a little bit. So I did want to spend another minute just on the fact of everything that Mark lays out when he's talking to Helly, by the way, when she goes into the bathroom to check on him. Speaking of mirroring on the show, when he goes into the bathroom to check on her and he's like, I'm going to come in. I'm coming in. And it's literally how she addresses him here in this episode. This time he's in the bathroom freaking out. It's easy to forget, given the way the show is structured, like how much that Lumon knows what's going on and has not tried to stop them. Like, it's exactly what he says. They have a map of the area. He's saying that he had a map from someone on the outside. He's saying they know Miss Casey is alive. They know that he has said this to his sister and to Rickon. They know everything. I mean, you can understand like how devastating he must feel, where he thinks like, here I am, this innie, I have like no control over my life. And now he has like taken the bull by the horns. And it's just like, no, they know everything you're doing and they're allowing it to happen. It's like, it's almost like an insult that they're allowing it to happen. Is this inconsequential, or are you just planning to let me get really close and then sabotage me at the 11th hour? But of course, Helly does mention at the end, not everything here is a lie, which is heartbreaking, but I mean, how can he trust anything?
You couldn't tell that she wasn't me?
Obviously not.
What was she like?
Like you. Or you're like her? I don't know. I don't know who you are, I guess.
Yes, you do.
Okay.
It's not my fault that my Audi hijacked me.
Yeah, no, totally. I get it. It sucks.
Mark.
Yeah.
What happened to you up there?
Doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter?
Nope.
Do you want to hear what happened to me?
No, I don't. And let's just try to forget it. Okay?
Yeah, I mean, it's the consequences would be too great to misjudge again because look at, I mean, he hasn't said to her that they had sex, right? But I'm sure he's
Right.
feeling the consequences of that and what it means for his relationship with her now. And I mean, already so much has happened that like he can't risk making that mistake again.
Absolutely. I mean, it either way. I mean, if he just emotionally wants to protect himself, he can't make that mistake again. If he wants to continue the investigation, he can't tell her about it because he just doesn't trust that it won't get out somehow. Okay, let's get to the performance review.
Oh my gosh, I love it so much.
Before we get there, though, on a little more serious note, before the comedy of that, although there's some creepy aspects to that performance review as well, but before then, Milchick talks to Natalie, takes her aside and says, I need to talk to you. How did you feel when you got those paintings?
Yes, that was so interesting.
And what did you think about Natalie's response? Do you think she's covering up her emotions, which seemed to be the case when she gave
Yeah.
him?
Yeah, I think he is looking for a genuine connection, and she probably feels it's too dangerous to actually be honest. And she's back on the company line.
It feels like they are trapped in a very similar way than we just saw in the previous scene between Helly and Mark, where they're like, I don't know what I can say to you. I don't know if I can trust that what I say to you is going to be between us. And here they are outside. They're like unsevered, supposedly, or definitely unsevered, actually, because we see them outside and inside with shared memories. They're in the same circumstance, right? They're still controlled by this. And Helly's controlled. I mean, Helena on the outside is controlled too. It's very interesting that like everybody is unable to speak their mind in any way. They're all controlled in different ways.
And it's also very typical, I think, of something that happens between coworkers, right? Where you have a certain opinion about everyone you work with. Let's just say, as a shorthand, these people are all bananas. But you don't know who you can share that with, right?
Right.
Because maybe they're one of the people that are bananas, or maybe you hope they're going to be an ally and say, I too think these people are bananas. But
Right.
you're trying to feel it out, right? About what side that person is on until you know you have a confidant that you can say, oh my gosh, and then this one said this and that one said that, and they are all bananas. And someone's like, yeah, I know. Instead of, well, they had a perfectly good reason for doing that.
And then sometimes even when they say that, you don't know what the agenda is there either. Sometimes, people will say that because they're telling you like, you got to play your politics here. They're actually trying to protect you. And you're like, do they really mean that? Or are they just saying that because I'm supposed to believe they're saying that? There's a lot of head games in any dynamic actually, but definitely in corporate and in the
Yeah, I
interoffice
think
politics.
I mentioned on the podcast once that I was invited to meet some coworkers for drinks, and one of them said, "Hey, I heard you're coming with us." And I said, "Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it." And she said, "Yeah, when this third person told me, they said, it's okay, she's not a spy."
Right,
So,
literally. Right.
but that's what people think about.
Of course. And then he goes in for the performance review. I do find it very funny that they're like, well, when these don't go well, these could take you up to 2 hours. If it goes more than 4 hours, then we'll pre-order a lunch. And Milchick is like, well, I hope it doesn't go that long, which, by the way, I'm sorry. You have to assume you're getting a terrible performance review given this month of activity at the but there is a very funny moment
Yes.
where he's like, here's the menu. First of all, the positives. His urinalysis, always spot on. And he did a sufficient job of accepting the paintings graciously. That's the positives. He did have, unfortunately, 3 negative complaints that were all anonymous, by the way.
Who could they be?
Who could they have come from? And yet have been confirmed. Number 1, uses too many big words. I love how he starts responding, by the way. Well, perchance I may colloquially employ, colloquially, oh my God, I can't say the word, employ. And I do like that Drummond interrupts and says, any anti-deflections will be
After
presented
lunch.
after the lunch. Yeah, exactly. Number 2 is especially crazy, where he put the paper clips on the wrong way, so it's confusing as to which direction you're supposed to read the report. I'm like, the printed side, I would assume, but I guess it's too confusing. That's how rigid they are in their protocols.
Yeah, I personally am on an anti-paperclip crusade, so there's no right way to use a paperclip as far as I'm concerned.
Down with paper clips. This is like your version of the innies, outies.
There are staples and there are binder clips in my world, and that's it.
Down with paper clips. And then number 3, your kindness reforms did not deter idleness or curiosity. And one team member was fired. Another one, the future CEO of the company, by the way, almost died. This was a complete failure.
I mean, when you put it that way.
Well, yeah, I can kind of see your point. There are a lot of crazy things that Lumon expects of you, but this was a complete failure, period, in any possible way. And the fact that he's just like, so I got a good review, right? I'm like, I think you almost killed the future CEO of the company. I don't think you're going to get a raise.
People enjoyed the grilled meats.
They did. And they end this whole scene with, this is right from the trailer, by the way, where Drummond says that you have the opportunity, that the processing of that Cold Harbor file would be one of the most important things that happened on the planet. It's interesting, by the way. I thought another thing that's interesting here, that they're saying this is one of the most important events on the planet. And in the last week's episode, where like this is the tallest waterfall on the planet, it's literally using the same language. And I'm like, so is this an exaggeration also? I'm curious to see how exaggerated this is too. Although I have a feeling that if it's like some kind of resurrection or something, obviously that is pretty impressive.
Fair.
And this will take place under your stewardship. That's quite a legacy you will leave, is what he says. And then, of course, he says, this is where this very funny sequence actually gets pretty grim, is when he says, treat them as they really are. And Milchick says, I'm going to
tighten the reins or
tighten the
something.
Leash.
Yeah, maybe that.
Yeah, I'm tightening the leash. That's what he says. I was just looking at my notes. But he does bristle once again when he's just like, treat them as they really are. All this negative talk about innies, he does bristle against this. And I think you can read it both ways. Like I've agree that I think he has had grown to have some affinity for these people, but I do still think that maybe he is an innie or was. And he does seem to be going full on Cobel, even though he literally in this scene says that I'm not Cobel. One last thing about the Cobel thing is that they could have Cobel back, by the way. She's offered to come back, and they seem to have no interest in bringing her back last week.
Where did we last see her? In the parking lot?
Yeah, when she runs off. She thinks they're trying to kill her or something.
Yeah.
And then we get close to the end of the episode. The biggest irony of all of them is that with all these distractions out of the way, with people not palling around, he has processed a lot more of the file. So like he could get this thing knocked out in a few more days if he keeps going at the pace. He did 4% in one day. Like that's a week's work for him. And then while he's doing that, by the way, he has another one of these like little flashes. Something happens. He has a little short circuit, probably when he goes into Audi Mark mind at some point for a little bit of time. And he looks at the clock and realizes that it's like the end of the day. Maybe he would have gotten even more of the file processed if he had shorted out there for a little while. And he decides to leave 6 minutes early. By the way, Milchick, this guy's about to cleanse this file, which is priority number one as far as everyone's concerned. That for him to be like, oh, leaving your desk six minutes early, are we? I mean, come on. It's not the time to do it. And by the way, once again, maybe a better manager, if this was Cobel, maybe who has a little more experience, she would be like, you know what? Whatever I'm doing right now, I'm taking credit for it because he's churning through that file. But this is when Milchick decides to put his foot down a little bit.
The tightening the leash.
Tightening the leash. And this sequence this actor can be so intimidating when he plays this version of Milchick. He goes into the elevator, gets right in his face. Mark, mocks him to his face, just basically saying, oh yeah, putting the numbers in the box or whatever. Oh yeah, what was that newspaper that you guys published? The Bullshit Gazette. He knows full well that is the bullshit article that he was showing to him earlier. And then he ironically says, praise Kier. And Milchick's like, oh yeah, have you told Helly about having sex with Helena
Mhm.
during the camping trip? The future, president of the company? He's telling him that he knows it. And he's also being like, hey, I could blow up. I could make your life
Right.
really, really miserable down here.
Right.
On the outside world, we see a few things happening here as well. Very important things right towards the end of the episode. One is we see Devin and Rickon together. Very interesting that we're reading the section of the book that was like this rallying cry for the innies in season 1, where it's like that clock is yours. They are stealing your time. And he has completely rewritten it, Rickon has, to be like, oh, the ticking of the clock is a pleasure, and you're working for your corporate overlords. And Devin's like, this is the exact opposite of what you wrote originally. And Rickon just transparently says, hey, this makes me millions of dollars potentially if I sell millions of these books to the Lumon company. And he's just like, I'm doing it for the money. And she's just like, no, thank you. I don't want to have this conversation with you.
Mm-hmm. I would have reacted the same way Devin did. You act like you are so invested in the message of this book, and now you become a sellout at the drop of a hat.
This is where the Trojan's horse, of course, he says it wrong,
Yes.
comes from. And I like how he's like, I'm going to Trojan horse these ideas in. And she's like,
Mhm.
those are Lumen's ideas. What are you talking about? Where are your ideas? You took them all out.
Really?
Audi Earth makes that phone call from the same payphone again.
Mm-hmm.
We overhear the conversation. He says, they fired me. I think they found out what my innie was trying to do. He hangs up suddenly because he sees Bert's car again. Doesn't know it's Bert at that moment. And then I like their conversation where he says, why were you banging on my door? That's why I've been following you. And he's like, I don't know. And he's like, that wasn't you, was it? It was your innie. And then they have the whole conversation about like, well, they told me I was dismissed for having some kind of erotic entanglement. And they're like, do you think it was us? And he goes, that's what Fields thinks.
Mm-hmm.
And Irv is like, Fields? It's like, well, that's my husband's name. And he goes, why don't we iron this all out and compare notes? Come by tomorrow. They're making ham. Bring some expensive red wine is what they like. And I do like the little, they have to get a little bit intimidation with this actor where he goes, hey, do you want me to take you home? He's like, no, I'll walk. Are you sure? And he goes, no, I'll walk. And he goes, I know where you live.
Yes.
And then he just laughs and goes, nah, that's okay. I'll see you tomorrow. Just that moment where Christopher Walken does his little creepy, I know where you live. And then, we get to the end of the episode. Ragabi is trying to do another one of these synchronizations. She's trying to bring up some of Gemma's personal effects that are boxed up. They've been boxed up all this time to see if it helps trigger anything in him. They talk about the cremated remains. Where do they come from? She says that they know people, at the police department, at the morgue. They could have falsified the documents.
Mm-hmm.
He says she's not dead. She's just not here. Once again, referencing directly to what he said about Irv, his innie said about Irv. And then he says, are they hurting her? And Ragabi says, I don't know. And then all of a sudden, he starts to hear Miss Casey's voice, one of his therapy sessions.
Mm-hmm.
We hear some of those hilarious compliments.
Love it.
Your Audi can, what were they? He can parallel park very quickly.
20
He plays his
seconds, I
utility-
think.
Wow, that is very fast.
Yeah.
He can pay his utility bills 3 days early.
Within 3 days, I think.
Within
it
3
was.
days, yes.
Yes.
He eats 2 scoops of ice cream, but it has to be the same flavor. Very
I
important.
disagree with this.
I completely disagree as well.
Yeah. Chocolate and vanilla together. Amazing.
It's all about the variety. Although I don't like chocolate and vanilla, I need a little more, something a little more exotic. But yes, I agree.
You haven't had the right chocolate and vanilla.
Perhaps. I've been eating the wrong chocolate and vanilla. And then he's inside of the severed floor as Audi Mark. So these memories are going to start flooding in. That's where we leave it for next week. Any final thoughts?
Well, like you said at the beginning, I think this was a little bit of a breather after everything that happened in a good way. I think it's, setting up the next sequence of events that's going to happen that will move this forward even further. I'm still really satisfied with the plotting, the pacing. It feels like it's all heading towards something. And I don't know what that something is, but I'm curious to find out.
Next week's episode is called Attila. Don't know what that means. It's about the same length as all the other episodes. All the episodes have been under an hour, like 50, 45 minutes. Next week's 48, so all about the same. I like that. These shows are not like 1 hour and 20-minute episodes. They keep them pretty tight.
Yeah.
And they don't feel bloated, by the way. Sometimes there's like 45-minute episodes where it feels like the last 5 minutes matter. It's like the Netflix thing. And these are packed episodes, but they're not too long. They're just like the right, correct length.
No, it doesn't feel like there's any filler in any of these episodes.
The description, by the way, of that episode is bonds are tested. Mark continues on his path of discovery. So I assume he is going to continue his reintegration process. And bonds are tested, of course, is all these different cross loyalties we have with these folks across the show. And I do hope we see Patricia Arquette again soon because I do miss her. That's the one thing I do miss in this particular episode.
Yeah, I agree. I like her a lot.
By the way, we have seen everything. I rewatched the trailer just today. We have seen everything that we saw in the trailer by this episode, except for we have Bert sitting by the fire. I assume this is going to be in his own home. So I assume this is going to be the dinner next week.
Mm-hmm.
And we have Cobel. We don't see her, but we hear her say, "There will be no honeymoon ending for you, Mark." And I don't know what that means, but there will be no honeymoon ending for Mark, apparently. Not this season, anyway. If you had to guess right now, is this show going to have a happy-ish ending where this comes to light, Lumon gets taken down, or minimally Mark gets some kind of control over his own life? Or is this going to have a really dark ending? What would you, if you had to guess one or the other, what would you think?
I don't want to guess one or the other because I think it's going to be a mixed bag, but
Yeah.
I think it's going to be more bleak than it is whatever the opposite of bleak is.
You don't even know what that is, Sona. You can't envision it.
But I think there's going to be some good and some happiness, but I think overall it's going to be bleak. That's my guess. What do you think?
I agree. I think it's going to be bleak, I have to say. I mean, but I think that, like, if the show is just all losses, I think that people will get frustrated with that. So I think there will be some win, right? Like maybe Miss Casey
Right, some small
gets
wins.
out.
Yeah.
There'll be some victory. But I have a feeling that things are not going to go well for Mark, is my general opinion. It's like number one show in the world right now. So they're definitely going to bring it back for another season. I don't know how much longer they can sustain that, though. The show, the production company for the show is called Fifth Season. So is it 5 seasons? I think that's too many seasons, but if they actually intend 5 seasons, I'm hoping for 4, maybe 4.
4 seems to be the sweet spot usually for television series generally, I find.
I agree. Although The Bear probably only needed 3.
We've seen 3 of The Bear.
We have seen 3. No, we have seen 3.
Okay.
And they shot 3 and 4, which is coming out this June. And we'll cover it here in a podcast, by the way. But they shot 3 and 4 together. But the original plan was a 3 season. And I feel like season 3 for me, I know people didn't like it at all. Season 3 for me had some of the absolute best episodes of the show.
It.
They could have probably put those 2 great episodes into whatever is remainder. And that could have been a really great season of the show. I feel like they padded it out a little bit. So
yeah, I get what you mean.
But I
did enjoy.
I still like season 3. I still like it. It was on my top 10 for the year. So
yeah, I enjoyed it.
And Sona, by the way, while I was waiting for you to jump on the call, I watched the first half of episode 1 of Yellow Jackets. Let's bring up Yellow Jackets again. Which I totally forgot.
You're so efficient.
It was out. You know how I saw that it was available? I was canceling my Paramount Plus subscription. but I still have a whole month because of the renewal. I still have a whole month before. I had it on a coupon and I don't want to pay full price for it. There's nothing I'm watching on there right now. So basically.
Okay. I know you only saw half, but what were your impressions of that?
Oh, that's why I wanted to bring it up. It's not terrible. And I do want to get your opinion of it.
A ringing endorsement.
Well, no, but I wanted to set it up that there's really nothing in it that was terrible in the first half of that episode, but I wanted to couch it with that because I don't know, something has broken with me and the show where I just don't care what's happening.
You're over it.
It's not like I saw the first half hour and it was such garbage that I just quit on it. I mean, it's the same show it was before. There's just something about it that just doesn't compel me anymore.
My husband calls me half the story Sona sometimes because I'm very much will hear like a catchphrase or a tagline. But if there are any follow-up questions, I have no information. And so as I was scrolling through something, as I do, I saw something that indicated that this season of Yellow Jackets, all of the good stuff is with the girls that are stranded and not
Yes.
in the present day.
Yeah.
And I've always been more interested in the present day lives of the
Yeah.
women. So that kind of gave me pause as to how anxious I am to watch this.
Yeah. So check it out if you want to. I don't know if I would recommend it. I probably won't watch it much further, but it was available and I had nothing else to watch. So I did watch some of it.
Who
A ringing
amongst us
endorsement.
has not watched something only because they had nothing else to watch?
I try to watch one movie every day now, Sona. Every day I'm trying to watch a movie.
I don't understand. Are you watching these on 1.5 speed? How are you getting through
No,
them?
it's my sleep ritual. So it's like what I do before I go to bed. I watch a movie.
A 2-hour ritual before you go to bed?
I try to watch. I mean, I can't always watch a 2-hour movie, so I try to watch like a 1.5 hour movie. If it is long, I'll usually not finish it, and then I'll finish it in the morning or something like that. But I'm trying to stick to my schedule. But in general, I try to watch.
Generally, the advice for good sleep hygiene is to turn off all the screens before you go to bed.
Oh no, I lay in bed and I watch the movie. But then if I'm tired enough, I fall asleep. So it all works out.
There's no screen that will prevent me from falling asleep. I'll just tell you right now. I could fall asleep anytime, anywhere.
Last night I watched the Sly and the Family Stone documentary, Sly Lives by Questlove, which is available on Hulu. Do you have any interest in Sly? Are you guys into them?
I barely have any idea what you're talking about right now. I didn't get it till Questlove. Now I have some sense. I mean, I've heard of Sly and the Family Stone.
Oh, okay.
I could not tell you a single fact about Sly and the Family Stone.
I thought you guys might be fans. I was going to say,
if
you're a fan.
My husband maybe,
Yeah.
but I could not tell you a single fact about Sly and the Family Stone, except that I recognize that name.
Okay. Well, then I'll just say it was very good. And if you like Sly, his music, it's a really good documentary. But
oh, good to know.
That's it. I thought you guys might be fans. That's why I wanted to throw it in there.
Maybe I am, and I don't even know it.
You may not know it. His music's been sampled a lot.
So there you go. Maybe
like
I
Rhythm
am.
Nation. The Rhythm Nation beat is from one of his songs.
I'm
and
definitely
hip hop
a Janet
uses a
Jackson
sample.
fan.
There's a lot of like hip hop.
All music does at this point.
And Prince was very heavily influenced by him. Parliament Funkadelic, and like all these people get interviewed. Not Prince, obviously, but everybody else gets interviewed in the documentary. And
is that another spoiler alert?
Yeah, spoiler alert. The spoiler alert is that despite all his drug problems, being arrested like 150 times, Sly's still alive. He's 81 years old. He was not in the documentary, but he's not dead.
Oh, more power to him.
They interview his kids, and we see pictures of him. So, and Andre 3000 gives great interviews. Andre 3000, by the way, very influenced. The way he dresses, his vocal stylings, and his singing, all very influenced by Sly. But anyway, it's good. It's very good. If you have any interest in Sly and the Family Stone, check it out. It's really good. And you might even like his music and not know it. So
I think that is actually quite possible and even probable.
Exactly. Oh, and White Lotus. Oh my God, how did I forget this? White Lotus
Coming
Sunday.
soon.
So Monday, we'll be recording another bonus episode. I guess it's not a bonus episode because it will be ongoing, but we will be discussing not Yellow Jackets, which I'll bring up for no other reason again. We will be talking about a full review.
We continue to talk about Yellow Jackets unnecessarily, picking up from last week.
I honestly just keep doing it because it's like now it's going to be a joke. I'm just going to keep doing it every week. We will not cover the show, and I'll just talk about it anyway. The White Lotus is coming back this week. And the reviews are in. I'm a little worried by the reviews, by the way. Some of them have been really ecstatic. Some people feel like, it's a little repetitive at this point. It all remains to be seen. And it's a short season, 8 episodes. Those, knock that out quick.
That's right.
All right. So I'm very much looking forward to that. So the White Lotus on Monday. Still talking about Paradise, by the way. Have you seen any of Paradise, Sona?
No, but it's getting to the point that I want to.
It's getting really popular. Our podcast
it's wearing me down.
Well, I'll tell you that I can tell when a show is building from week to week. When we do the Severance episodes, they're very popular. And then they peter off until we do the next episode. Like we have our loyal fan base is waiting for the current episode for that show. And what's happening with Paradise is kind of what happened the first time we covered The White Lotus, where over the course of the second week, like the previous week's episodes are even more popular than the current week's episodes because people are catching up with the show. So you see that it's building up like a head of steam. So you may inevitably have to watch it. And you know what? It is such a bingeable TV type show that ends on a hook every episode. And there's only 8 episodes. You may want to wait like another week till like 6 episodes are out.
Yeah.
And then just burn through it. And then, just watch the last 2 episodes or something in real time. You do not need to be like honed in looking for all the clues. Like it's traditional television where the big hook, the aha moment is in the last 5 minutes of each episode and it hooks you directly into the next episode. So it's a very easy watch. And I think that's why it's been so popular. And we'll talk about Paradise for the next 3 weeks until it wraps up, and 5 more weeks of Severance and 8 weeks of The White Lotus. And then your friends and family, Sona. Only one show. Only one show, which is much easier than 3. I'm waiting for that day to come.
Yeah, then we'll complain. There's nothing going on.
There's nothing on. There's nothing to watch. Oh, there's a lot of stuff to watch this year. After the writer's strike, they're like packing stuff in. So there's plenty of stuff. So there'll definitely be plenty of stuff to cover this year. All right. Have the happy rest of your Valentine's Day, and I will talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon.
All right.
Bye.